I've really been interested in how artists could have a bigger role in cities and help make issues of sustainability apparent to people. So I came up with this notion a few years ago that it would be wonderful if Broadway became the corridor of New York City where people could come to see new ideas, and that incrementally over time artists would do projects up this corridor, small scale or large scale, that demonstrate things like composting or letting people know that there's a LEED certified building that they've just walked by, or letting people understand what happens to the water when it goes down the storm drain. I've been working with a number of artists, starting to invite artists to take walks with scientists and talk about issues that they're interested in. We invited 6 teams of artists and scientists to conduct a series of walking dialogues as part of our Broadway 1,000 Steps initiative. This was done in partnership with Marfa Dialogues on Climate Change, funded by the Robert Rauschenberg Foundation. Each art and science team explored issues of mutual interest around current environmental challenges that were relevant to selected hubs along the corridor of Broadway. We've spent the last several years working with students from different universities to research these hubs and to find out what were the most important topics to people along the corridor. Through the implementation of Broadway 1,000 Steps, City as Living Laboratory seeks to establish New York City's iconic avenue as its green corridor, where current and planned sustainability initiatives can be brought to the awareness of every citizen at street level. The long-term goal of this project is to foster an incremental transformation of Broadway into a place where citizens can come to see new ideas about the future city. The first walk, which focused on the shoreline of Battery Park, was conducted by artist David Brooks and Dr. John Waldman, a marine biologist. David and John had a really interesting conversation talking about the hidden dynamic of New York Harbor and how it might be made visible. How could we become aware of the migration patterns of fish below the surface of the water?
We have such a clearly delineating geometric line here. I mean, it very much is like nature over there, culture over here. Like, I would almost want to generate some kind of a pier or a structure as you come back and check in on it over years, that you begin to see it become part of this other environment through its degradation. I look out here and I would love to see like if there was like a whole sculpture garden that was on a barge, and then we just submerge the whole sculpture garden. I want to see what that looks like again in 20 years, and I want to see what that looks like again in 30 years. So how does one foster these connections with that thing over there? It's actually not over there, it's like right here. There just happens to be a railing, you know, and so it's a psychological as well as a phenomenological leap. But there's such an intense amount of drama that happens right here with migration.
We have some phenomenal migrations here, but they're quiet and they're invisible. There's about 200 plus species known from the Hudson watershed north of the Battery, and 300 plus from New York waters around Long Island and the lower harbor. So we have this great diversity of species, actually driven to a large degree by a fact that I think most people don't recognize, and that's that we have the greatest temperature swings of water anywhere in the world around this region. You know, if you come here in mid-January, you may see ice floes wrapping around from the upper Hudson with ice floes this thick from water that's 32 degrees. And if you're out here in July, the water may be in the mid-70s and even in the low 80s in the Hudson. Nowhere else on the planet do we have temperatures that exceed that swing. So that drives a lot of the diversity. There are a lot of species that are happy being here in the winter and can't tolerate summer temperatures and vice versa. So you get a lot of movement of fish moving through just because of the seasonal temperature swing. The harbor has already risen about 1 foot in the last 100 years. That might rise anywhere on the order of 2 or 3 feet by the end of the century further.
The second team included artist Jan Munn and Sabina Marks, a behavioral scientist from the Earth Institute's Center for Environmental Decisions. Their walk began at the foot of Battery Park, where Jan has worked with local volunteers to establish and maintain a number of beehives over the last 3 years. Their dialogue also emphasized the vulnerability of the lower Manhattan shoreline due to global warming.
The question is, when the bee smells the banana, it gets into attack mode. And what gets us into attack mode, that we're attacking the risks that we're facing. So if we are able to connect like the things that we consume with the larger world, if we build these connections, it is much easier to take action. And if we can build these connections or by vicarious experience or second-hand experience, it can be a way to communicate better.
So we've created sort of an interface where you can experience some of the conversations that we're having. Bees were introduced to the U.S. By the settlers in the 1700s. Right now they pollinate about $14 billion worth of crops globally. Many people know from colony collapse disorder there's a reduction of bees or losing bees globally up to 40%.
The artist team Kristen Jones and Andrew Ginzel partnered with Dr. Nina Bassett from Cornell University. She's a horticulturalist who specializes in urban forestry, and they led the third of our walks in Madison Square Park. With Nina's guidance and special equipment, the team sought to decode and bring attention to the invisible and complex root system of a majestic elm, one of the oldest trees in Madison Square Park. Kristen and Andrew did an installation that evoked this tree's root system.
And Andrew and I are interested in a project that we're calling Behold, which would celebrate all the great trees in the city. So this is an experimental sort of step towards our project where we would somehow make one of the great trees in each of the boroughs magnified and help people be aware of the grandeur and the beauty in our midst. We built this little island. The water is supposed to come right up to the edge of it to sort of show us nobody really knows where roots go or what they look like. So this is sort of a river root network system that we thought would be beautiful, especially with the golden tip of the building reflected in the pool.
Most people don't know where roots are, and I spend many, many years studying them because where roots are, you need to have soil. And the reason why we have such big trees in this park is because the roots are really extended a large area and being able to get the water and nutrients to support the tree. Many people think that the roots are the mirror image of the top of the tree, but in fact, roots are very, very shallow. We developed something called structural soil, which is meant to be used under pavement, where you have to compact it so that all this heavy stuff is going to not subside or sink. It's a lot of rocks in it. It has a lot of rocks in it, yeah, and then the roots can shoot through this because the stone touches each other and creates a rigid matrix, and then the roots shoot through where the soil is. So it can be compacted, and it's being used in New York City as well as all over the country, Canada, and it's only meant to be under pavement.
Also at Madison Square Park, artist Ellen Driscoll, architect Juliet Spertus, and trash expert Benjamin Miller led a participatory discussion about garbage, which offered a new vision for the city's waste management. With human-scale equivalencies, they illustrated the volumes of trash created by city residents and the environmental impact of hauling our garbage out of state to remote locations via highly polluted trucks. Juliet and Ben talked about ideas they have about moving trash through a pneumatic trash removal system and how they might do a demonstration in this park.
1 year of trash collected from the Flatiron Business District will reach 137 miles into the sky if the garbage bags are stacked end to end on top of each other.
One of the ways that we can begin to overcome some of these problems is actually starting again with what Ellen has done, making it visible.
When recycling came into the city, the problem only got worse. Practice, it just added another bag to the street which has to be sorted. So now we have black bags, and blue bags, and clear bags. All of these things have to be sorted for more trucks. Trucks in a dense urban situation are very damaging, particularly garbage trucks.
Starting at 173rd Street, a relatively high elevation in Manhattan, environmental engineer Franco Montalto demonstrated how planning, design, and construction impact stormwater runoff. Franco had paired up with artist Marco Antonio Castro, who over the past few years has been promoting an unconventional idea to outfit city buses with green roofs that would mitigate stormwater runoff
You're a raindrop and you can't get into the surface, and let's just see where you end up. If you were a raindrop that fell in the middle of Broadway, way up there, this is where you would no longer see the light of day. The city is proposed is to try to send water, instead of around corners and down angles and into catch basins, send it into the ground. And so what you're standing next to here, if you look at this little tag, is one of the 1 million trees that the city has built.
The final tour was conducted by artist Matthew Jensen and Dr. Robin Wyatt, director of the Columbia Center for Children's Environmental Health. Wyatt's research has documented the adverse impact of pollution and other toxic chemicals found in common household products on child development in the surrounding neighborhoods. Matthew explores the urban landscape, searching for and documenting marginal, overlooked locations. He brought the tour to the futuristic, semi-abandoned bus terminal on 178th Street, a site where one can view the relentless car and truck traffic that pours pollution into the surrounding buildings and neighborhoods. Robin Wyatt and her colleagues measured the air quality as the group progressed from 168th Street to the highest geological point in Bennett Park at 185th Street. And we could see how the air got cleaner as we got up higher and further away from the traffic.
And inside, it's probably one of the only abandoned places left in Manhattan. You go in there and there's no restaurants anymore, there's nothing. Stairs, it's kind of an interesting transition in space, so let's just do that. But it's hard to feel abandoned in New York anymore, in Manhattan, because it's so perfect now.
So I have actually been running a longitudinal birth cohort in this neighborhood for the last 15 years. A longitudinal birth cohort, which means we enrolled 727 Dominican and African American mothers during pregnancy. We have the women wear these backpacks. We looked at phthalates. They both increase a child's risk of asthma significantly. The best way to get something to happen is through consumer pressure. But you need informed consumers to be able to do that. So your consumers need to be informed.
Demographic and economic shift dramatically according to air quality. This is just a little letter that explains what we did today and what we talked about, and we've got a few lists of things to send to these locals. They're newly elected, they may not know anything about air quality despite the fact that they get hit so much. So I thought it'd be cool if they ended up with this letter from us with just a bunch of random signatures, get them scared, and then they'll actually read the little list behind it about phthalates and things like that. But on the 10th of November, a group of New Yorkers gathered at the corner of 168th Street and Broadway to talk about air quality while on a walk to the highest natural point of the island of Manhattan. The walk was held in conjunction with Mary Miss City as Living Laboratory and the Marfa Dialogues as part of a continued examination of climate change science, environmental activism, and artistic practice. Robin Wyatt, Matthew Jensen, MFA artist and instructor at the New School, guided this meandering tour of the neighborhood. We talked about air quality, tested air samples, and studied the landscape in an effort to generate a list of suggested changes that would help improve the quality of life for residents in your district. The attached list is yours to keep as food for thought or fuel for change.
Call walks have been initiated by City as Living Laboratory to decode the urban environment through immediate place-based experiences that are visceral and accessible and made apparent by artistic practices and strategies. It is hoped that these exploratory walks will lead to long-term partnerships between artists, scientists, and community members around projects that make sustainability tangible through the arts. Our goal is to actually see some of these ideas that have been developed in preliminary conversations developed into full-scale proposals, and from that into actual constructions in the neighborhoods we visited.